Pastor Jackie Jack Samuel.
Yes, sir, Pastor.
As the youth pastor of Emmanuel, you presented a very compelling and dynamic word as Jesus spoke to his disciples about going to the other side, the crossover.
Yes, sir.
What was pulling and demanding for you in receiving that message as God identified to you what to say to his people?
Well, Pastor, the time that we're in, we're on a side, and we're also in a storm. And so it was from that position that I, as I studied that text, that I saw that we are going somewhere, but we're in a storm and we're not there yet. So what do we do while we're where we are to get to the other side?
As the youth pastor of Emmanuel, you kind of in that area where, as you present, you have to speak to both the elders and that generation that you are called to. How do you balance that in receiving the word and presenting what God gives you?
Well, Pastor, honestly, I was born in 1978. And so from that position, I have the pleasure of being not as old as my elders and not as young as the millennials. I'm right in the middle. So I actually feel like God has placed me in a position to reach both of them, to know and remember how we did church when I was younger, but to also look and listen to the younger generation and then try to bridge that gap between both generations.
So now this crossover, this God going one way and ending up another, as Jesus speaks to his disciples that we are going to the other side. Let's go to the other side. How does God move in your life in this way of crossing over? The relevance of that message for you, or that word for you that God gave you to give to us?
It's really simple, I think, Pastor, in the sense that he was teaching. I look back and remember a lesson that you taught us about the soils and the reason why some people don't receive, and because they've been trampled on, the reason why some people are shallow. And I brought all of that together, just realizing that seeds are being planted, but are the people really, is it growing in them? That's why I made the connection and the application to, you've been teaching us how to get over for the last 3 months, but have we really been listening to that? Taking the trouble out of trouble. We are in some trouble, but we need to know how to take the trouble out of it. So bringing all that together, Jesus then said, let us go. And I remembered and saw in that text, he didn't say, I'm sending you. He didn't say, I'm gonna meet you. He said, let us go. So you've been giving us word to help us get to the other side. I just believe the timing of that was that God said, we're in a storm, but just know, he said, let's go. He actually showed us what the vision should be, and then he gave us victory in the storm before getting to the other side.
Yeah, that unique connection that you were able to make between going over to the other side and the soils, and so that aspect as well. How do you apply that as God gives us? Jesus said the seed is sowed, but he makes us understand that the seed was the same, but it was the soil, and the soil had different experience, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
The soil, all soil hadn't gone through the same thing.
Yes,
some had been trampled, and we know the application of it. How does that apply to your ministry, and as you are speaking to the youth and the generations that you are called to speak to? How does that work for you?
Well, it works, Pastor, because the soil is the soil. But I think I remember saying, it's not the seed and it's not the sower, it's the soil that has the problem. And so from that position, I always remember when I'm looking at younger people or older people, they are soil. And in that text, Jesus also said how tribulation comes for the word's sake. And so then I have to try to make the connection with them. Yes, your family situation is what it is. Where your background is what it is. But the soil, you are the soil. God is tilling you. He's preparing your heart so that when you come to church and Pastor Thompson plants this word in you, that word is supposed to get rooted and grounded in you and then grow and produce fruit.
Because as you pointed out, regardless of what the experience was, we were still called to go to the other side.
Yes, sir.
And so as our ministry, we have the different experience, but it doesn't relieve us of the call and the direction in getting to the other side. And especially in this season that we are in, now as you are ministering and we are called to minister to people, the people of God want to hear and about that journey. And tell me again how you applied that with the points you made for that journey in getting to other side, as you talked about how God speaks in certain ways. Talk more about that.
Yes, sir. So he verbalized. Jesus said, let us go. And just on his verbalization, as we know from the beginning, when God speaks, there was darkness before, but when he spoke, there was light. So for me, that their direction and their situation changed when he said, let us go to the other side. He didn't say this is the only side or this is the one side. There's a other side. Then he said, I like how the vision, really this was an obscure point for me, because what they looked at and even what I focused on was the storm. But then I just saw and remember how you teach us, Jesus was sleeping. They saw him sleeping. So if they saw him sleeping, should they have been focused on the storm or focused on the fact that he was resting? He's the one that said, let's go. So it must be okay for us to rest too. Then the victory, I saw this thing with victory that they weren't even where they were going. And he said, peace be still. And there was immediate calm. So even before they got to the other side, the victory, they already had the victory. I think it was then that I realized when you teach us that we're not fighting for victory, we're fighting from victory. So when they got to the other side, they already had the victory over the storm and what they were going to encounter.
And that was so powerful that as you illuminated that point, because even though they were in the storm, but the victory was already in place. And that's so compelling, because we find ourselves in struggling and we would tend to focus on this storm that Jesus rose and rebuked, but he didn't do it to apply victory, to command victory, to receive victory. Victory was already there when he said, let's go to the other side.
Yes,
and I
sir.
think you did a wonderful job in bringing that to life and bringing that scripture and that word to life for us, that we could see us in that passage, how God speaks in our life. Let's go to the other side. Pastor Jack lets us know that Jesus has spoken, and all we have to do is live it. And although there comes times when the storm is raging, but we have the instruction of going to the other side.